This is Caroline from Caroline's Adventure. We all face challenges in our lives. How do some people take those challenges and turn them into powerful results? Join me as we dig into a story on resilience, hope, and joy, and uncover lessons we can each use in our own lives. But before we start, please take a moment to show that 5-star rating button some love, and follow while you're there to be updated every time I release a new episode. Now, before we begin, a word of caution. On this podcast, we regularly discuss topics like sexual assault, suicide, and addiction, which may be disturbing to some. Please take care as you listen. And if you need support in the United States, reach out to the crisis text line at 741-741. Hey y'all, so today is the anniversary of my accident, and I realized that this might be a cool opportunity to go back and give you guys all a summary of what happened, the impact that it's had on my life, and answer any of the questions I usually get. So 12 years ago, on August 18th, I woke up, and it was one of those perfect, beautiful mornings. The weather was great. There was no humidity, which is really rare here in the DMV, but it was gorgeous out. And we knew that there was a peach festival happening in a little town nearby called Middletown. And so we decided to go to that. My kids were little. Ben was about 8 months old and Sterling was a little over 2. So they were both tiny. My parents were with me that day. And so they decided to take Sterling off and explore. And then I pushed Ben in the stroller. And it was one of those nice, just relaxing days, tons of people, all kinds of cool things to see. And we hadn't gotten a chance yet to try any of the peach stuff because it was early in the morning and we were just getting a feel for the lay of the land. The way that it was set up, they had shut down all the roads in Middletown. And there were different parking lots throughout where they had taken and cleared out the parking lots and then set up little kiosks around them and little booths for people to set up with arts and crafts and that kind of stuff. And so we had explored one parking lot and we were crossing over a street to get to the next parking lot and they were all closed. So it wasn't, there wasn't really anything to look out for. We were walking diagonally across the road and everybody else was because there were barriers at either end and the roads were closed down to be used. So I'm pushing Ben in his stroller and he's super happy and burbling away and chatting with me and I'm smiling, looking at him. And I can remember looking down at him and feeling what felt like someone had taken a baseball bat and hit me as hard as they could across the legs. And my initial reaction was just shock. Like I was so surprised and upset and a little bit angry. I was like, what in the world? And I turned back over my shoulder and there's this huge old Buick. And it didn't quite sink in for me at first what was going on. I turn around and I start pushing Ben again. And then I hear like a rev of the engine and it hits me again. And each time that it hit me, I flew forward onto the stroller. And it definitely, it jarred me, but it also really jarred Ben. And he was pretty upset. By the second one, he starts screaming. And I'm completely confused. I turn around and I start banging on the back of the car, trying to get her to stop because I'm like, okay, how many times is she going to goose the engine and hit me? And at that point, like I'm completely just out of sorts. My baby's screaming. People are coming running from all over. There's lots of questions going on. I'm not sure what's going on. And my biggest concern is my baby. He's really upset. So I get him out of the stroller and I sit down on a curb and I just start rocking him and trying to get him to calm down. And finally I reach in and I grab a bottle and I try to feed him some because I'm like, okay, that's the best way I can think of to soothe him. And I remember just saying to him, it's okay, you're all right, it's okay. The lady gets out of the car, she talks to a couple people, and then she gets back in her car and takes off. And I'm completely confused. I knew at the moment that I wasn't mortally wounded because there was no blood. I could still kind of stand on the leg that she had hit. She hit it primarily on the back of this leg. And so I knew that I couldn't see any bones jutting out or anything like that, but it was really painful, and when I would stand on it, it would collapse. And so I knew that it was injured, but I was most worried about Ben, honestly. Somebody called the police and someone else called the paramedics. So all these cop cars show up, and a couple of fire engines come running. And a crowd chases down the lady that had ran, and they catch up with her about a block and a half away because there was nowhere for her to go. All the roads in that area were closed down. So there was no way for her to get out from where she was. So she was kind of stuck. So they bring her back. She said, I thought she was fine. And, I'm like, I don't have any idea. And honestly, in the moment, my only concern was getting my baby home because he was freaked out. The crowd had him really upset. As we had sat there, the day had gotten warmer. And at the time, I thought it was just a lot of adrenaline going through my system that had me freaked out. I had no idea that anything else was really damaged. So they tried to talk me into taking the ambulance, but I can't take Ben with me in the ambulance, and that was my biggest concern. Was I didn't want to just hand him off to family. I wanted to take care of my baby. So I turned down the ambulance. They made me sign a waiver. Someone goes and gets the car. Maybe it was my partner. I can't remember. Someone goes and gets the car. It must have been him. They open up the road to let him on there to come get me. And then we go home, and I get the babies put down for a nap, we fed them, all that. And then I start to realize I'm in a lot of pain. Like my leg really hurts. And I've got this really intense headache. And so I decided that it's probably not a bad idea to go to the emergency room. I mean, I probably should have done that from the beginning, but I said, okay, time to go to the emergency room. So I go, they take me in, they run a bunch of x-rays, they do a bunch of scans, and I said to them, I've got this really bad headache. But when they asked, did I bang my head at the time of the accident, I didn't. And so they wrote down that I was fine and sent me home. And that first night, I didn't sleep, but I just figured it was because I was so tired, or I was so sore that I just couldn't sleep. I was super uncomfortable. By the second night, when I didn't sleep, I figured something was up, but I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just in a lot of pain, and that must be it. But by the third night, I knew something was up. So I went to the doctor's office, and they prescribed me a muscle relaxer, and that did help somewhat. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it did help me kind of relax enough that I could kind of doze some. And at this point, I'm on crutches. My leg is really swollen. It's black and blue. It's really uncomfortable, but I knew that it wasn't broken. And so that was, in my mind, my biggest concern was, okay, there's no broken bone, so I must be fine. I was in the process at that point of selling my house in the city and buying my house up outside of the metro. And so a couple of weeks later, I close on the house and go to move in. And I'm still on crutches. I still can't walk. And I decided, okay, since I moved into my new house, I'm going to find a orthopedist and a neurologist. And so I go to the orthopedist, and he's like, we do all the tests, and he's like, okay, we're going to get you some physical therapy and see what that can do, see if that can help. Because the biggest issue was my balance was really bad. And so I started doing that. I went 3 days a week to physical therapy that first year. And we did everything. We did acupuncture, we did massage, we did ultrasound stimulation, lots and lots of chiropractic work, specialized stretches and exercises and all these things to try to build up my balance again. but it would still leave at weird moments. And I'd be walking down the street, and then suddenly my balance would go and I would fall. One of the things that I realized fairly, I won't say early on, but a year into it, I realized that I couldn't control the pain and I couldn't control the damage, but I could control the weakness. And so that was when I turned to weightlifting. I figured that if anything would help me regain my strength and my coordination, it would be weightlifting. And so I started lifting regularly. I started working with a personal trainer because I had no idea what I was doing in the gym. And began the process of putting myself back together. And as I started to redevelop my strength and my coordination, my balance still stayed off. And so I started talking with more and more doctors. I walked with a cane for a long time. And it got more and more frustrating because I had this just intense headache that stayed with me perpetually after my accident. It was just, it felt like something was gnawing away at my head, and it had two components. The first component felt like a band around my head, and I always compared it to like a baseball cap or a metal band, but it felt like somebody was taking screws and tightening that band, and it was just, it was insanely uncomfortable. Then the other part was more of a full body headache that made me nauseous, made me light sensitive, made me really sensitive to noises, which is really tough when you've got babies because babies are noisy. And so that was brutal because I'm trying to take care of them. I'm really scared at this point in time to carry Ben because my balance would disappear at any, at random moments. And I dropped him several times. The final time that I carried him down the stairs, I dropped him down the stairs, and I was like, you know what? Luckily, I managed to turn my body at the last minute and fall with him on top of me. And so the way that we landed was he was okay, but I was like, you know what? This is too dangerous. I can't take this risk. And so I stopped carrying him down the stairs, and I had to teach him how to scooch himself down the stairs. But I kept going to the doctors, and they would say, oh, yeah, I don't really know what's going on. It was really discouraging because I started to question myself. I was like, am I making this up? If I'm the only person who's ever experienced this and they're telling me that there's nothing that should be causing an issue, am I making it up? And so I started to really doubt myself. And then finally I found a neurologist in Baltimore who, it was miraculous. From the get-go, he knew exactly what was damaged. He knew how to address it. He had a care plan. He had done this over and over again. He worked a lot with professional athletes, especially soccer players, because evidently the act of headbutting a ball creates a lot of concussions. But also a lot of people who'd come back from the military, and he said that the impact from explosives lots of times would cause all kinds of damage to the nerves in the back of the head and to the occipital lobe. And so it was amazing to have someone who, first of all, was like, yes, I know how to handle this. But second of all, was like, yes, this is a real thing. You're not making it up. It's not your imagination. So that was amazing. And that helped exponentially. It was incredible to have someone who had a care plan that he was actually confident would work. And so we started on a whole new series of medications. Throughout this process, the number of medications that I've been on and the number of different therapies that we've tried, it's overwhelming sometimes when I look back at it. We had to have a court case for this, and my lawyer brought in my medical records, and it's like a 2-foot tall stack of records, and that was incredible to me because when you're in the moment, you don't realize how many different doctors you're talking to or how many different approaches you take. So that was kind of staggering to sit there and look at all these different things and to go through them with the lawyer and be like, yes, we did this, we did this. Yes, I did that, I did that. So the neurologist in Baltimore was amazing. We started different medications that he recommended. He did some injections, trigger point injections that helped, but none of them conclusively resolved the issue. And so he said, okay, the last step in this is to just go in and actually remove the nerves. And that was a scary process because you're removing spinal nerves from the back of the spine and the head. And so it is very risky. It's risky from the standpoint of it can result in facial paralysis. It can result in other parts of paralysis. And there's also really large risk of infection back there, which I was like, you know what? I had to decide that the relief was worth the risk. So he went in. He works with a plastic surgeon, and they went in. I've got incisions all across the back of my head, all along the sides, and through here. So I've got scars all over from where they removed the nerves. But they went in, they stripped out 6 of the nerves, and I'm now permanently numb from here back. And it was amazing the difference it made. I literally, on the way home from the hospital, was shocked at how much less it hurt every time we hit a bump. Because it used to be every time I'd hit a bump in the road, it would cause these just flashes of pain. And I still get them, but they're in a much smaller part of my head now as opposed to all back in here. And so that made just a miraculous difference. The back of my head is permanently numb, and that's weird sometimes. Early on, it was very strange because when I would lay down, it would feel like I was floating. And so I had to get used to that. I had to get used to not having those nerves back there. Also, the area around where the incisions are, the nerves are hyper aware. And so not only am I numb through here, but I've got like this halo of hypersensitivity. And as time has gone by, it's less and less. That surgery, I believe, was 10 years ago. So at this point in time, I'm pretty used to it, but it's taken a while to get there. And I now go in every 8 weeks to get Botox injected into the areas around where there's nerves left. So even though I've got numb through here, I still have nerves all down along here. And so that's what they do, is they put injections all down through my neck, all down through my traps, along the sides of my head. And what that does is it kills off the remaining sensation that's left after they remove those nerves. And I'm grateful for that, because that combination of removing the nerves and the Botox have given me my life back. Before that, I thought a lot about self-harm. I thought a lot about what kind of quality of life was this to live with such constant oppressive pain. And it was oppressive. I made so many dumb mistakes driving just because the pain was so intense that I couldn't keep my thought process straight. I couldn't maintain conversations for the same reason. Sitting and having a conversation with someone was impossible. This podcast would have been impossible before the nerve removal and the Botox, because I couldn't maintain the flow of thoughts. One of the scariest things that I had happen during that time was I was at a street that was ending along a highway, and I was getting ready to pull out, and I can remember looking up and seeing the tractor trailer truck. I saw him. It wasn't that I didn't see him. It wasn't that I wasn't aware. I looked up and I saw him, and that moment of, okay, there's a car coming, do not pull out, it just didn't happen. I pulled out in front of him just casually, and he's honking and swerving, and it was terrifying because it wasn't that I was being self-destructive or rude. I just literally did not have the thought process follow through of, okay, there's a car, do not pull out. Several nights on the way home from physical therapy, I would get home and pull into my driveway and realize that I had made it the entire way home in the dark without my lights on. And that was tough because like that is such a simple thing. But little things like that, I just, my thoughts did not connect. I would show up at weird times to pick my kids up from preschool, or I would arrive at play dates at wrong times. And it wasn't that I was trying to be dismissive or rude. I would set reminders. I would do all these things, but my brain just didn't work correctly. And so one of the things I've realized now is that like when you're getting ready to go someplace and you've got time to be there, you'll start to count backwards in your head of okay, here's what I need to do. And I couldn't keep track of those components. And so I would do that and I would plan them out. And then I would look down at my clock and I'd be 45 minutes late to wherever I was supposed to be. And in my brain, I had been thinking I was clocking appropriately towards whatever it was I was trying to do, but I wasn't. And it wasn't until someone would reach out to me and be like, are you coming to pick Sterling up from preschool or things like that, that I'd be like, oh my God. I would set reminders on my phone. I would do all those things. I would write them down. But I didn't have the ability to see those steps through. And so I was dropping so many balls, and it was awful. And so having that surgery was amazing, and having the Botox, that combination just has given me my life back. I'm so grateful for it. But one of the things that does make me sad is that my kids will never know the me that I was before the accident. They were little, and they have no memory of who I was, and they'll never know who I was. One of the things I've had to make peace with is the fact that there is no going back. And for a long time, that was all I wanted, was to get back to who I was. But that doesn't exist for me any longer. I don't have the ability to get back to who I was. And that's hard, because to have that suddenly taken away from me, and through no fault of my own, I was on a closed street, and even before I crossed the street, I looked both ways. And that's how I knew that there was people all over walking, and that's how I know that there were barriers to both sides, because even though I knew it was close, I stopped and looked both ways and laughed about it. And to have my life taken away through just a dumb accident was really hard. And I had to make peace with the fact that I would never go back to being that person. I could never go back to being that person. That person was a brain and a body that just no longer existed. And I had to learn how to make peace with who I am now in this moment, and accept the fact that that is who I am. That's all I have access to. And to make the best of it. And that was a learning process. That was a whole evolution that I had to make peace with. And it is tough. It's been an amazing change. I'm very grateful for where I am and who I am at this time. But it's been a huge evolution to get here. One of the things that I've talked openly about is the fact that I grew up in an abusive household. And up until my accident, I didn't really talk about that. I was ashamed of it. I owned a lot of guilt over it for some reason. And I also maintained a facade. And having this accident stripped away my ability to maintain that facade any longer. And so one of the things that happened was that I lost some of my best friends, because once I started openly talking about the issues that I had in my life, it no longer correlated with the version of me that they were comfortable with. And so our friendship died. My mother and my relationship with my parents completely changed. And I no longer have a relationship with them, because I was no longer able to put up with the dysfunctional patterns that I had always accepted as just life. And once you're stripped away and taken down to the bare bones of who you are, it takes away your ability to just ignore and let things go. And so I had to start addressing things and really pushing things to be healthier, because I no longer had the ability to just accept it and put the facade on and smile and pretend things were okay. And that was tough. I don't think anyone ever would choose to end their relationship with a parent. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I said very openly to my mother, this no longer works. I refuse to let you repeat the same patterns with my children. And the only way for us to have a relationship is to work in therapy to make this better. And she said, that just sounds like too much work. I'm not interested. And I had to accept that. It's her choice to make, and it broke my heart, but I have to accept the fact that that's her right to make that decision. So it's been a process. It's been a long learning evolution. It's been a hard one. I've had to make peace with a brain that works differently than it used to and a body that works differently than it used to. But I'm incredibly grateful for where I am, and I'm incredibly grateful for the fact that I am as healthy and as capable as I am, because it's taken a long time and a lot of work to get here. And I thank you for listening with me today and bringing your support and, just being here with me through the process. It's amazing to have so much support from social media. It truly is. You guys have no idea how much of an uplift that is and how helpful it is, especially when things are tough, because I still get the headaches. I still get the muscle issues. I will always have the vestibular damage. And so I will always have balance issues and pain. And it's just the reality of life. But it is wonderful to have so much kindness and support behind me. So thank you all so much. And I appreciate you more than you will ever know. And that's the story of my accident. Sending you all love.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Caroline's Adventure podcast. While you're here, subscribe to the show so you're the first to catch new episodes when they're released. And if you enjoyed hanging out with me today, please leave a 5-star rating. For links to social media and more content, visit the description for this episode or go to carolinesadventure.com. That's Caroline with 2 A's, adventure.com.